BetOnline is the world's most trusted betting platform and your number one source for all of your sports betting action. Baseball season is in full swing, and we're into the NBA and NHL playoffs. And BetOnline has more ways to stay on top of the action with all the latest odds, news, and scores, even live in-game betting while the games are being played. With the largest selection of odds on everything from Major League Baseball, NBA, NHL, UFC, BetOnline remains the best online source for all of your sports wagering information. In between games, just head over to the BetOnline Casino with all of the top Vegas-style games, including poker and live casinos. BetOnline, the game starts here. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Believe in Bengals podcast. Yours truly, Solomon Wilcots, along with our Cincinnati Bengals insider, Charlie Goldsmith. And Charlie, let's get started by just giving some kudos to Joe Burrow, who's living the life of an NFL quarterback, attending the Metropolitan Gala over the weekend. He was looking pretty good as well.
I think it was a big emphasis of last offseason that he's taken into 2025, kind of enjoying the experience more. He puts himself through the ringer for like 8 months a year, 9 months a year. Yeah. And he is making sure that as we all need a little work-life balance, and he's making sure he's using the other months because that can help him keep him fresh and ready to go for a long season ahead of him.
It is for a good cause to raise money for the Metropolitan Arts Museum. Of course, they raised $31 million during the gala. So it is one of the great events in New York, of course. Hey, let's talk about the Cincinnati Bengals because the players have reported for the voluntary portion of their offseason training program. Just kind of back us up a little bit, Charlie. Help us to understand what are maybe some of the points of emphasis for Coach Zach Taylor and the coaching staff entering this offseason training program.
Well, here's the first one, and this is a really, really significant one, is basically everyone's there. The exceptions are Trey Hendrickson, and we'll spend the next 4 months talking about Trey Hendrickson, and then Jermaine Pratt, who likely doesn't have a future set with the Bengals going forward. So aside from that, there are no distractions, there are no headaches, there are no missing pieces. Like, for example, nothing against this guy, but Sheldon Rankins just didn't show up last year, and that's fine. Jamar and T were late arrivers because they were in their own contract situations. They're here now. They can use and get a lot more out of this time. It's not just developing the back end of the roster like it was last year. It's really about on defense, establishing kind of a new scheme. On offense, kind of developing some of the new leaders and some of the new faces and some of the new pieces in that mix, getting a new offensive line coach, getting that technique process underway. So there's definitely a lot they can accomplish.
Well, as you well know, Trey Hendrickson is bound and determined to get a pay raise over and above the $15 million that he is set to earn during the upcoming 2025 season. It is the final year of his contract. Someone like Myles Garrett, who's the highest paid player at their position, is making 3 times what Trey Hendrickson is making. Danielle Hunter makes more than twice the amount of Trey Hendrickson, despite the fact that Trey has led the league in sacks over the last 2 years. He was the league leader during the 2024 season. How close are we? Do you think he'll come close to getting what he's expecting? I don't think he'll get the $40 million a year that Myles Garrett is getting, but he certainly is probably going to come close to 30 to 35 in line to what Max Crosby and Danielle Hunter are making.
I think the biggest question Trey has to answer is how determined is he to truly test the market and significantly really hit free agency heading into next season. So ultimately that will decide whether or not he would want extra years tacked onto this, which was the mistake he made 2 years ago. In the short term, I expect a continued drawn-out process where sometimes there are conversations and sometimes there may be stretches without much progress or without much, leading towards Hendrickson's long-term future with the Bengals. It feels like that's kind of the stretch we're in right now where everyone's kind of just waiting for one side to move.
Well, yeah, that means we could have sort of a standoff. Let's say if training camp starts, is Trey Hendrickson in camp or not in camp? And if he is there, is he working as a hold-in? You know how it is. You show up, but maybe very little work gets done. And then does that drag into the regular season? I think that's the greater question.
I learned this from Jesse Bates, who he had his own no show for a couple weeks into training camp. I believe that was 2022.
Yeah.
And later at the end of the season, I talked to Jesse about this. I said, one, why didn't you show up? And two, why'd you show up the day that you did? Like August 7th, what made that the day? And he was very honest. He goes, I had no idea. It was a vibe. I changed my mind 10 times. Like I couldn't make it up one way or another. I ended up just being bored. I'd just gone to the Bengals preseason game as a fan. I was bored. I was ready to be back. But I almost didn't go. It was almost there. I truly think there's some unpredictability here. Like the Bates example and the true honesty coming from him later in that process about what happened in August shows how these things, in my opinion, really work. And you could speak to this better than I could. Mm-hmm. Players sometimes are fickle and sometimes they change their mind, and sometimes the vibe's telling them one thing and sometimes the vibe's telling them another. And Jesse basically told me, don't try to be in the business of predicting this because us players can be unpredictable.
Yeah, and I think for Trey Hendrickson, he is a team guy. I think he's one of the leaders on this defense. I think he said it last year. The reason why he was in training camp and not holding out, despite maybe wanting to trade or whatever and more money, he said that he felt that it was a team that could go to the Super Bowl. And he didn't want to be the reason why they didn't go or why they would not accomplish their goals. And I think he will show up for training camp. I will think he will come to work. And you should know, for vested veteran players, and Trey Hendrickson is one of them, if he's on the roster when the team plays week 1 of the regular season, his contract for the year is guaranteed. So what you get after that, I think, becomes the really big question. But I think the integrity in which he approaches his job, I think he will show up for work, and he's going to give maximum effort when he does. Let's move along. I want to talk about Shemar Stewart because since you and I last spoke, I've had a chance to go watch him on tape. I let the tape tell me what kind of player Shemar Stewart is. And here's what I found out. He's hard to block. He's devastating when it comes. He can split double teams between the guard and the tackle. He's really good as a run defender. You don't have to worry about, can this guy stop the run? He's going to make the Bengals defensive line better in every way. And I think because he's hard to block even with double teams, he doesn't have the high volume of sacks, but he does have a high volume of pressure, which means he can help other guys get sacks. What say you, Charlie? What have you seen in the week since the Bengals have used that first-round pick on Shemar Stewart?
Clearly the Bengals believe in him, right? Like they took him from what those thought from their side. What you'll hear is a lot of context, which is true, which is important, which is notable. A lot of context that because Texas A&M maybe had the best defensive line in college football, there were fewer drop back passes than basically any defensive line in the league was facing. It was either all play action, move the pocket, it was screens, it was quick game. There were very few opportunities to truly finish. Also, it was such a loaded defensive line that everyone was getting sacks. Stewart was getting plenty of attention, but part of what he does was setting things up for others. Now, how much truth and translatability is that for Stewart now heading into the NFL where, sure, he'll be the most athletic, but maybe he won't be the true number one like he was at Texas A&M, obviously in the Bengals mix right away. So how translatable is that? That's the million-dollar question that the Bengals don't know the answer to, that I don't know the answer to. Yeah. But certainly there was a lot that they liked clearly that they saw, even athletically, how his elite testing numbers translated and showed up on a snap-to-snap basis.
I also have to tell you, I did some homework and I found a comparison, a comp, if you will, for a player who played 3 years, big time Power 5 conference football for 3 seasons and ended up with a low number of sacks. And then tried to see if that translate. If you get low number in terms of low production in sacks, can you come to the NFL and get a high volume of sacks? There is one player, Danielle Hunter, by the way, who's the second highest paid edge rusher in the NFL right now on a per annual basis. During his 3 seasons at LSU, he finished with the exact same total of career sacks in college as Stewart. 4.5 sacks. It was phenomenal. 4.5 sacks in 3 seasons while he was at LSU. He's now played 10 years in the NFL, and he has 99.5 sacks. That's almost 10 sacks a year over a 10-year career. So we have a long-term career with a high volume of production for a player who had very little production in college. So there is hope for Shemar Stewart when you talk about a guy who didn't get a whole lot of sacks in college, and hopes that he can exceed that at the pro level. Let's move on because I want to talk about some of the position battles entering training camp as they're going to eventually wrap up the offseason training program. I want to start by the offensive guard position and take a look at the battle that's going to ensue with Cordell Volson along with the third-round pick, Dylan Fairchild. How do you see that battle faring?
It's really a 5-for-2. It's Volson, Fairchild, Patrick,
that's right,
Cody Ford, and Jackson Kirkland, who's kind of like the sleeper former undrafted free agent, but he's truly getting a shot as well. 5 guys for 2 spots, and it's going to be an absolute someone please step up and earn a job type situation. They're going to be mixed around, thrown around, different combinations, different spots. The exception being Fairchild will be primarily left guard. And that as well kind of gives him a leg up heading into this battle as well. He'll get every opportunity to win that spot with the most pure talent of anyone in this group. But even so, he's a rookie. We've seen a lot of rookie guards in Cincinnati not be able to cut it right away. So obviously you don't know. You can't guarantee it. They like those other guys that they drafted previously too. Patrick and Ford have lower floors, or lower ceilings, but they have more experience.
Gotcha.
They know schemes more and stuff like that, so that kind of gives them a leg up. Kirkland's a nice athlete, so let's get him on the field in camp. They have no idea who's going to win the battle. The preseason games will carry a lot of weight. Let's see what happens.
Yeah, so you basically have 3 guys battling for the 2 guard positions, left guard and right guard. We'll have to see how it all turns out. Let's go to that defensive end, sort of edge rusher position. They did bring back Joseph Osai, so he right now is penciled in as the starter. Can he hold off Shemar Stewart? I think all money is betting that Stewart will play well enough to beat out Joseph Osai, but I'm sure Joseph Osai is not going to just give it up for the rookie.
And don't forget Myles Murphy, who maybe is even the favorite. You know, playing Myles Murphy has been a big talking point this offseason. Go around the locker room. Who's the guy you're interested to watch in 2025? It's Myles Murphy because, you know, he has shown flashes. His pressure rate was strong. He has the size to make an impact against the run. And it's just been a small sample size because he didn't get a lot of opportunity. There's a lot we'll have to learn there. I'm telling you, just like if I were staking a flag right now, it's that Murphy, quote unquote, will run out of the tunnel with the starters. But in September, Zach Taylor will be asked about, you know, in a press conference about the defensive end room. And he's really going to make the case that Stewart, Murphy, and Osai are all starters. And he'll have a case there because starters aren't the guy who played the first snap of the game. Because Murphy and Osai will be lining up a lot on the interior because they're maybe the Bengals' 2 best interior pass rushers right now, because it'll be a lot of rotating and matchup specific. And how do you line up against this tackle or against this pass protection scheme? Murphy, Osai, and Stewart are all different. I think they'll all definitely get their chances, and it kind of will be 3 guys sharing that quote unquote starting spot, and they'll all play a lot of snaps as well.
Do you like that? Do you like the depth that they have and the talent that they have, at least above and beyond what you saw last year at that position?
That's the model. Like, look at what great teams are doing. Teams have a lot of not dart throws because dart undersells it, like aggressive bow and arrow shots on the defensive line where they have one wave after another, because how you get exposed is when you don't have depth and you have to overextend your starters. And so you're getting worse versions of themselves at the things they're supposed to do best at. So having that rotation has been a big point of emphasis.
Demetrius Knight Jr. was taken with the 2nd round pick, linebacker. He's expected to compete with Jermaine Pratt and potentially could end up starting week 1, depending on how receptive Pratt is to showing up on time and playing at a very high level. That could be, I think, a really interesting training camp battle.
What's interesting to me is, you know, Demetrius Knight, every NFL draft analyst in the book compared him pre-draft to Jermaine Pratt. Very, very similar skill sets. The thing is, I've heard no indication or guarantee or acknowledgement that the Bengals plan for Jermaine Pratt to be on this roster in 2025. When you look at the money they could save against the cap by cutting him, by the fact that Pratt didn't play well enough last season, and the fact that they drafted his replacement in Demetrius Knight. When you draft a 25-year-old who some considered to be a reach in the 2nd round, you're drafting that guy to start, and he'll compete. He'll have to beat out probably Oren Burks. 4th round pick Barrett Carter profiles more as a Logan Wilson backup. They'll call it a stack linebacker who's maybe more vertical depth, pass coverage range, pass breakups, stuff like that, maybe even an interception or two, quarterback spy, that type of stuff, with your true outside backer being kind of Knight and Burks playing that role on the depth chart.
And remember, Oren Burks was on a Super Bowl winning team last year where he came in and replaced Nakobe Dean on the Philadelphia Eagles defense and helped that team, became the starter through the postseason and helped them win the Super Bowl, where he was the starter in that Super Bowl. He was not just a backup quarterback. He's a kind of a do-it-all, everything linebacker, and this guy can flat out make plays. So it'll be interesting to see where he fits in that rotation, as starting jobs are open on the front defensive line, at the linebacker position. And now let's move to the secondary, because Dax Hill is going to move into that nickel position that we've seen manned over the last several years by Mike Hilton, who we all know and love him. I'll be honest with you. I'm going to miss him. I always thought he was a guy that we can hang our hat on. Obviously, the Bengals move on, and Dax Hill is going to be penciled in as a nickel. He's tried to play the corner. He's tried to play the safety position. Is this going to be where he really finds his home, as that nickel corner position in Al Golden's defense?
I'm going to say not so fast there from what I've been hearing. So the Bengals, with what they drafted a linebacker, just in general, the Bengals are going to be playing three linebackers more than they did in the previous regime. So when you have three linebackers on the field, that takes away your slot corner. What was so beautiful about Mike Hilton was he stopped the run like an outside linebacker as a nickel corner. So now maybe it's just you start on base downs against big personnel, which is the trend in the league, more two tight end sets. You'll be seeing more three linebacker sets, which means two corners on the field. So who are those two corners going to be? Who are your best two corners? The Bengals picked up Dax Hill's fifth year option, backs up what I've heard too. They see Dax as one of their best two corners, along with Cam Taylor-Britt. So that means on base down, it'll be probably what I would project: Cam Taylor-Britt on the outside, Dax Hill on the outside, because there is no slot nickel cornerback when you're in as much 4-3 as the Bengals might play on early downs in 2025. Now, what do you do on third downs? You got DJ Turner in the mix. You got Josh Newton in the mix. DJ Ivy's going to play because of how well he matches up against tight ends. A lot of different options and avenues they can go. What I know is they'll be very matchup specific. So, what's this team's slot corner like? What are the classic one was last year. The Bengals had Cam Taylor-Britt guard AJ Brown and DJ Turner guard Devontae Smith. That makes sense on paper. Yeah. So you'll look at those on paper matchups. So what I expect is sometimes Dax will be in the slot on third downs. Yeah. Sometimes will be out wide. Sometimes will be on the tight end. So they won't really replace Mike Hilton, but Dax and his versatility will make an impact of him still being a valuable every down player.
So unlike Lou Anaromo, who ran more of a 4-2-5 defense, four down linemen, two linebackers, five defensive backs, we could expect from Al Golden a 4-3-4 sort of alignment in terms of personnel grouping. Four down linemen, three linebackers, four defensive backs. Is that fair?
Yes, and something Lou did a lot as well was when he did go big, it was more of a 5-2-4, where he'd bring in that fifth defensive lineman on the edge. Right. The Bengals, again, are going towards more 4-3 looks in 2025, and that has a ripple effect there.
Yeah. Hey, look, I'm going to name some guys. These are all young defenders. Everyone who asks me, how does the Cincinnati Bengals defense gets better? Yeah, there's no doubt. I think they need a Trey Hendrickson. They need his production, right? He needs to be in the 15 sack range to be playing at that high level. They're going to need Logan Wilson and whoever the other linebackers with him to be more stout, particularly against the run, right? So we can force teams into third and long. And then on the back end, when you get a team in third and long, your secondary's got to play well. But I'm going to throw out some names that for young players like McKinley Jackson, like Chris Jenkins, like Dax Hill and DJ Turner, and Cam Taylor-Britt, and Jordan Battle, and Miles Murphy. Those names, to me, are so very important. If the Cincinnati Bengals are going to get back into the playoffs and make a run in the playoffs, surprisingly like they did in 2021, to me, I think this team can beat any team and play with anyone if those young players that I just named are playing at a high level and living up to their draft potential. Charlie, what say you?
This is why they hired a college defensive coordinator, right? This is why the whole conversation about the draft was getting a defensive coordinator who had a vision for the young players they brought in the building. You mentioned a lot of those names, and Lou Anarumo a former defensive coordinator, did a lot of fantastic things in Cincinnati.
Yeah.
But a flaw was over the last couple of years, you bring in Miles Murphy to be this speed pass rusher, and you use him as a run stopper. You bring in Chris Jenkins, hopefully to make an impact against the run as a 3 technique, but, kind of an off-center role. And you end up playing him either as a nose or as a true pass rusher you're counting on. And that doesn't align. Dax Hill, you brought him in to be a safety, and then you're moving him to corner. Zach Carter, you brought in to be a pass rush defensive tackle, then you're playing him at nose. Like, there wasn't that alignment and that synchronicity. So that's what Al Golden is here to do, because all those players, we haven't seen the best of them. Al has to be able to do that.
Well, there's no doubt the defense has to improve. And I do believe that there's room for improvement on the offense. Yeah, that's right. I said it, Charlie. A team that scored over 30 points or more in 8 of their 17 regular season games last year. We already know Joe Burrow was spectacular, right? Led the league in so many meaningful statistical categories. I think we can make the argument that he would have been an MVP, hands down, had that team made it to the playoffs. They win one more game, they make it to the playoffs. I think Joe Burrow would have been our league's MVP. So the offense was great, right? If I told you that there's one area where this team can make really great improvement, just off the top of your head, if you were taking a guess, what area would that be?
What was so beautiful about what you just said was they had that offense with maybe the worst offensive guards in football.
That's right.
And playing more Cody Ford, who did play out of position at tackle last year, and playing, having the floor of a Lucas Patrick or the upside of a Dylan Fairchild. Like, there are questions with that, but it won't be the worst. And so that should help. Also, a theme is they want to get off. It's cliche, but they want to start games strong and then run the ball more. Like, that's their whole plan this year. Yeah. There are lots of conversations and emphasis of establishing the run game and leaning further in to the breakout that Chase Brown showed last season. Because Chase Brown, he's ready to be a top 10 running back in football. Yeah. If the game scripts play themselves out a certain way, you can see that become more of an emphasis. So definitely opportunities there for the offense to be even more dynamic.
See, you nailed it. You know your business here, Charlie. I love it. I love it. And here's the one thing I'm going to go with, because you mentioned several things, getting off to the fast start. There's no doubt about it. And more importantly, I think the run game can be better. In fact, I would tell you it has to be better. And we've got to, it's got to have a higher run play percentage. Last year, Cincinnati Bengals run play percentage was 32.9%. That means they were running the ball only on 32% of their plays. It was the second lowest run play percentage of any team in the NFL. And do you know that over the last 3 years, they've had the worst run play percentage of any team in the NFL? And over the 5 seasons since they've had Joe Burrow, they've run the ball less than anyone. And I'm not saying, I think it helps Joe Burrow. I think we can avoid the sack total being high, like what we've seen since he's come along. We can help add diversity to the offense by running a little bit more, and it protects our quarterback. I think in all those ways, it helps our offense to be more physical. We don't have to throw the ball with 4 minutes left on the clock and put our defense back out on the field. We can run the ball and eat what time is left on the clock. So in many ways, just being a little bit more balanced between the run-pass ratio, I think would make the Cincinnati Bengals a much better offense. Well, that's going to do it for today. Great stuff from you, per usual, Charlie. Is there anything you would like to add before we wrap it up?
I'm just glad I didn't get the call for the Met Gala, because I only have one sport jacket. And, well, I think it's a nice sport jacket. It wouldn't have quite fit the theme as much, but maybe I'll break that out one of these days.
There was even one guy from Outkast. He was wearing a piano on his back. That's right.
Did it work?
At the Met Gala. He was suited and booted. I still want to get the interpretation of that outfit, because I don't get it. Who comes to a party wearing an outfit with a piano literally strapped to his back? I'm sure it was made of some lightweight paper mache material. However, the theme was duly noted. I just couldn't process it all. So hopefully I'll have to up my fashion game as well. So, Charlie, we appreciate you. We thank you for joining us. And everyone in Bengal Land, we thank you for joining us as well. We'll be back with more, bringing you more good content to Bengals Nation When we return next week, we'll see you then.